Hi everyone, welcome to Code Kamkaj YouTube channel. I hope everybody are doing good. So one of my subscriber has requested to make a video on difference between Docker and Docker Compose. So this video is all about the difference between Docker and Docker Compose, why we need a Docker and what all advantages with the Docker and Docker Compose. So stay tuned till this video. You'll be get the full information about the main difference between Docker and Docker Compose. Okay, now jump into the concept. The first one is Docker and the second one is Docker Compose. So what is the typical definition of Docker? So Docker is a platform that allow developers to package application and all their dependencies into lightweight portable container. These containers bundle the code, runtime, libraries, and settings required for an application to run consistently across the different computing environment. So you may not get understandable of the this definition. So that's why I brought you schematic diagram where I can explain in an easy way. So here, there is a requirement. So developer one have the source code, and developer two requested developer wants to share his source code. But this developer one have all the dependencies, code, runtime, libraries, and settings. He have everything to run his code. Now the developer two does not have the all the environment like dependencies like libraries that has not installed in his environment like laptop or desktop. So what developer one said, okay, developer two, do not worry, you don't have all this environment has been set up. So what I will do, so developer one said to developer two that I'll package my entire application into a Docker image and I'll share it to you, which means like developer one has package entire his source code, runtime, libraries, dependencies, settings, like whatever required to run his application into a lightweight Docker image with the base operating system. Now the developer one has shared this Docker image to a developer two. So developer two does not have any environment ready, but he has only one tool has installed in his laptop or desktop, that is Docker. So by the help of Docker, so what developer two did, with he already received a Docker image. So by the help of Docker tool, so he created a container out of the Docker image, which means like he successfully run his entire source code, which is resides inside of this Docker image. So that's the beauty of Docker, which means the developer too does not have any supported environment already built in or already installed in his local, but by the help of Docker lightweight, so developer one have already packaged all the runtime code dependencies into lightweight, as just imagine it's a mini server, lightweight mini server. So he might have used any one of the operating system or base operating system on the top of this image. So he shared to the developer too. Now this developer too, what he did, he has installed Docker tool on his local, or it can be a laptop or computer. So with the help of it, so he has created a container out of the Docker image. So that's the beauty of it, and he successfully ran the same source code whatever developer one has developed, and developer two can see the same results whatever developer one has shown into these two guys conversation. So there is no any dependency issues in between this. If you go to the backend days, before Docker or any container runtime, there is a huge war going between the two developers or testers or any working professional between them, because they does not have the same supported versions or dependencies in between those two guys or in between the team. So if this guy had developed the Python or Java 7 or 6 version, this guy has a Java 10. So once he share his source code to somebody, so this developer one have gotten some kind of results, but this developer two cannot get the same results because he does not have a supported dependencies or supported versions have installed in his laptop or desktop. So that was the biggest war had been going on old days. But once Docker step into the picture, so the war has ended, and now everybody can see the same results by taking help of containerization. So in our case, we are using Docker. So in the market, we have the bunch of container runtime tool like Docker, Rocket, and Containerd. So you can use any one of that. But yeah, the biggest issue has been resolved. So this developer too does not have any dependencies installed in in his local or desktop, but still he can run the same application whatever developer one has developed, and he can see the same results over here. So that's the beauty of Docker. So yeah, that's all the just glimpse of Docker, and I hope it is make you understandable of Docker. And now let's jump into the Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is a developer-friendly tool that lets you to define and run a multiple containers together, and making it much easier to manage the complex applications. So Docker Compose is generally used for development and testing environment, and it is not suitable for production. True. Which means, let's example, I'll walk you through the schematic way. So let's example, you are the developer and you have built an application, which was the backend application, which written in backend Python code. Now you would like to test the application, whether how it is working or whether working fine or not. But typically, if you'd like to test it, so you may test it in your local laptop, but you'd like to test it on Docker or container level. So that's the reason, you required a medium, you required a place to run it. So you can take the example, you can take advantage of Docker Compose. So imagine, you are a developer here, and you have your Python backend code is up and running on one container, and you would like to test it. So you required medium, or required tool that you can test it as spontaneously without needing any complex environment. So you can take advantage of Docker Compose. You can define your backend code, whichever backend container that you would like to use it, and you can define your database container inside of your Docker Compose together, and you can run those two containers together by the help of Docker Compose. Which means, you can run multiple containers with the Docker Compose without required any complex environment. But it is only developer friendly. You cannot use the same Docker Compose for production, because there is a bunch of issues for happen in production, and even Docker Compose does not support all the specific areas such as auto scaling or auto healing. So we have such a dependencies with the Docker Compose. That's why it's not useful for production. But yeah, so if you are a developer, you would like to test your code whether how it is working fine or not, so you can take advantage of Docker Compose, and you can run your application with the Docker Compose. But still, Docker Compose also using backend as a Docker container runtime, and this Docker Compose was built by the Docker, the official Docker tool itself. Sorry, Docker organization itself. So it's just a tool which typically used by developers or testing engineers, whether they want to test application in the local environment or not, by integrating backend or a database container, or you can have another front end application also. So you can bind all these three containers together by the help of Docker Compose, and you can run it in your developer environment or testing environment. So that's the beauty of Docker Compose. It is very quickly. You can run all the containers together, and you can see how your entire source code is behaving on containerization level. So yeah, I hope it is clear for you, like the difference between Docker and Docker Compose. And now let's jump into the actual implementation. So I brought the source code. I have the source code. I have the Docker file. So first, I'll explain you, if you want to build a Docker image, so you require a Docker file, and with a Docker image, you can build a Docker container. So first is the Docker file, and second is the Docker image, and third is Docker container. So if you want to build a Docker image, so you should have a Docker file. But instead of Docker file, you have to specify where is your source code, where is your backend, and where is your database. All the information you need to specify. For that, I have the code resides here, which is app.py. So this is my entire source code. I just have written some basic source code in Flask application, which is the backend one. And I'll specify the database information, host and username and database, and all the information on the passwords. So I have the route, which is the saying that hello from Flask API, and the second one is it is going to print the few data, it is going to fetch the data from my database. So for that, I have used the init.sql, where I have injected the two tables with a name, and the name, which is Alice, and this is my Alice and Bob. They are 30 and 25 age. So I have just injected. I have just created two tables inside of it. For that, I have used the MySQL database. And if you want to Dockerize this application, app.py, so you require a Docker file. So here we have a Docker file. I have been using the base operating system as a Python, which is Slim. And this is my work directory inside of my image or container. And I'm copying the app.py. I'm copying this file from this my local into a Docker image. So for that, I specify the copy component. I've been copying the entire my app.py into this app directory, and I'm copying my requirement.txt file. So instead of my requirement.txt, I have specified the version which is the Flask, which is dependencies, and MySQL connector for Python because I'm using the MySQL database. That's why I've specified the MySQL connector, and I've copied these requirement.txt into the same directory, which is app. And now I'm running the pip install hyphen and requirement.txt. So here, whenever I'm creating a Docker image, so this command will execute and all my requirement get installed into my image. And I expose the 5000 port and CMD, CMD is regularly used whenever you are creating containers. So that time this command will execute, and I'm running the Python app.py, which means like whenever I'm running my mini server, which is the Docker container. So my entire application, my entire backend application will get up and running, and with the help of this command. So if you want to create a Docker image, you must have to write a Docker file, and you need to specify where your source code is resides and how you would like to run your application. What is the command that you would like to run creating the Docker image, and while you're creating a Docker content, what command you would like to add for making your application up and running, and you need to specify where is the work directory instead of the container. So all the statements you need to specify in a Docker file itself. So once it's specified, now it's the time to go with the Docker Compose. So with the independent Docker file, you can run entire Docker container, but our requirement is to run the backend and database. So we have successfully copied our backend entire source code into Docker file. Now we can create a Docker image and we can create Docker container, but we would like to specify Docker Compose because I would like to run two containers instead of my Docker Compose. So I'd like to make a communication between my backend code to my database code. That's why I have been using the Docker Compose. In your requirement, you may have a front end and back end and database. So as per your requirement, you can use the Docker Compose to make a connection between these through three containers. So that's up to your complexity or up to your requirement, and you can take advantage of it. You can run this Docker Compose in your local. So for Docker Compose, we have the predefined a YAML template. So we need to use the sampling template. I've been going with the version 3.8. I have specified the services and backend. This is my backend, and I'm going to use the dot, which means wherever resides my Docker file, it will get built and it will expose the port number 5000. And this is my database host name, and this is my username because I'm going. This application will communicate with my database. Container with this all information like my host, like username and password, and this is my database, and this is depends on the DB container. So this is my database container which is running. So for database, I have not been built any Docker file because I'm already predefined Docker images are available. That's why I'm directly using those Docker images over here. So I'm using specifying the image, which is a MySQL colon 5.7, and this is my environment, and this is the root password, and this is the database name testdb, and these are the volumes that have been attached into my database, and this is the volume data. So this is how I can specify this entire section is related to my backend code, and this entire section related to my database code, which means this entire section related to my backend container, and this entire section related to my database container. So here these two containers are getting talking each other based on this depends on, and this is the DB, and now these all the communication happen between my backend to front end via this environment like MySQL host, username, and passwords. So once I run this Docker Compose.yaml file, what will happen? First, it will create my entire backend, and later it will go for creating the Docker container. In the backend, whenever you hit the this particular port 5000, so first it will go to the home root, it will specify hi home Flask API. And later, if you requested for any data, my backend container will go and talk to this database container because these two act as a local host instead of this entire Docker Compose. So we don't require a networking concept here. So accordingly, it will go and talk to this database. So we are storing the data instead of database, this all query like ls20 and bob25, and accordingly it will get injected in this database, and I can see those data into my browser by hitting the data as a route. So here we have added the data as a route, right? So I can see it. So this is how you can specify two containers. It's not only two containers, you can specify three containers. If one is the front end and back end and the database. So just to make you understandable, not making complexity, I made two containers here. Fine. So we have a Docker file here. We'll build a Docker image, and after that, I mean, this Docker Compose will build it, and it will run my entire application. And this database image will convert as a Docker container. In the backend, it will run those two containers here. Fine. Let's time to show you in a practical way. I'll go to new terminal. So I think it is up and running old one. So yeah, if I do clear. So if you'd like to run now this docker compose.yaml file, there is one command. So you need to use this. Like the command is docker-compose up build. So this is the command that you need to use it to build your two containers. And if after that you can communicate those. You can talk to your backend, and the backend container will go and talk to your DB container. If you want to do this activity, so you should run the docker desktop in your local, or if you're using any linux or any mac os kernel, so this docker has to be installed in your environment, then only you can build it. Otherwise, you will be stepping into the issues like docker is unavailable, or a number of issues that will be rises here. Fine. So this is the command. Once I press enter, what will happen? So it will first build my backend container, and later it will build the DB container here. If you see this one, it has been building the all my backend here. So this is first has been finished the backend, and later it has been running the container for DB, and it has been exposed this to the 171.0.1.5000. If I go and hit this port, I can see my backend code as a response. I'm going to this browser. If I press enter, so message hello from Flask API, which means in the backend we have written this as a route, which is a home route, message from Flask API. Now I'd like to see whether my code, whatever injection I have done into my database, like these two tables, which is name and age, Alice 30 and Bob 25. So it has been injected or not. If I want to see that, on a browser, so I need to hit the another route that we have specified into source code called as a /data. If I go here and if I paste this, if I press enter, now we are getting the two records. One is Alice 30 and two is the Bob 25. So what is happening here in the Docker Compose? First, it build my backend container, and so when we have interacted with the 5000 port, and we requested database to give a data which we injected from our source code, which is any.xql. Now this database container has two records. One is the Alice and Bob. So if I requested my database container to get the data, so what it will happen, my backend container went and talked to database container, and it asked for hey, this guy has requested for data, give me data. So what database container did, so it is giving the data with the name of Alice and Bob by the route called as data. So this is how, by the help of Docker Compose, you can bind multiple containers together, and you can run those two containers together into a dev environment and test environment. You can see the results, in how your entire application is behaving, instead of going with the complexity Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or any other orchestration tool. So yeah, fine. I hope it is clear for everybody, difference between Docker and Docker Compose, little way of explanation. Still, if it is not clear, I request you to drop your comments in comment section. I'm free to reply back and make you more understandable on this two concept. So yeah, I'm ending this session here. Thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing this channel. Yeah, stay tuned. Bye bye.